our top story this morning takes us to Canada, where an Israeli comedian was briefly detained in Canada this week. This is amid international legal complaints over his conduct in and around the Gaza conflict, the debacle. The case has since sparked debate about accountability, freedom of speech and its limits, and most importantly, international law enforcement. Israeli national Guy Huchman, a comedian and former reservist, was held for approximately 6 hours at Toronto Pearson International Airport early this week, after the Canadian authorities essentially subjected him to extend questioning following a criminal complaint filed by the Hind Raja Foundation and allied legal groups, and that they were alleging war crimes and incitement to genocide related to his social media posts and performances tied to Gaza. And we're going to be unpacking briefly on that. We're going to be chatting to Charlotte Ketz. She's a very, very good friend of the show, and she's with the Samidoun Prisoner Solidarity Network, and she's an international coordinator of that organization. Charlotte, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate you giving us your time.
Thank you so much for the invitation to be with you.
No, pleasure's all ours. I think we can kickstart the show with just a bit of background from your perspective and your analysis of the detainment of Guy and what it entails and the kind of precedents it sets for others that are like him and carry themselves in the manner that he's been carrying himself.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, one of the things that's very important to note is that Guy Huchman isn't randomly a comedian who happens to be a Zionist. He was an actual member. He was brought to Gaza by the occupation forces. He was enlisted as an entertainer, and it was in that capacity that he routinely engaged in advocacy for the genocide of the Palestinian people and direct incitement to genocide. So this is not an issue of freedom of speech or commentary or entertainment. This is an issue quite clearly and quite directly of active involvement and participation in the military force directing a genocide against the Palestinian people. The Hind Raja Foundation, which is a Belgian-based Palestinian and Palestine solidarity organization that engages in legal work around the world in order to pursue and hold accountable war criminals who are responsible for the ongoing crimes of genocide against the Palestinian population in Gaza and throughout occupied Palestine, submitted along with Canadian lawyers for human rights an extended dossier documenting Guy Huchman's participation in active genocide in Gaza to the Canadian authorities, calling for him to not only be detained, but to be refused entry, and if he is not refused entry, to be arrested and to be criminally prosecuted. The crime of genocide is a crime that can absolutely be pursued in courts around the world. There's no obligation on internet. In fact, the obligation lies with states that are signatories to the Genocide Convention to actively work to hold accountable those responsible for genocide. This extensively documented dossier was seeking not just that he should be detained and then enter Toronto in order to perform a comedy gig, months after engaging in a full-scale professional campaign of advocacy and incitement to genocide as an official representative of the occupation army, but that he actually be arrested and prosecuted for his involvement in genocide and crimes against humanity. While it is certainly good that he was stopped and detained, this is highly insufficient to meet the requirements, the basic requirements and the basic responsibilities, not only of the Canadian state, but of all states to actively seek to bring an end to genocide and to prosecute those responsible in order to hold them accountable.
No, most definitely. And the one conversation, as I was reading up on this and I was looking at the sentiment on social media, there was a conversation around, especially coming from critics who argue that detaining someone based on complaint dossiers almost risks undermining due process and freedom of expression. How do you respond to concerns on that? Concerns about civil liberties to an extent in this case, especially given that Hushman was released and allowed to perform subsequently?
Well, Canada and the Canadian government have been complicit in the genocide in Gaza all along and have been complicit in the colonization of Palestine since 1948. So it's not really a surprise, unfortunately, that this impunity has been allowed to continue. After all, there are at least 49 dual citizens, Canadian and Zionist, who are documented to be active participants in the genocidal military in Gaza, and they are not being prosecuted nor being held accountable for their ongoing crimes against the Palestinian people. And these are crimes that violate Canadian law as well as international law. It is very difficult to see where a freedom of expression issue arises, especially when there is a very real freedom of expression issue in Canada about Palestine. And that freedom of expression issue is the targeting of people and organizations that act in solidarity with the Palestinian people and take action against genocide. For example, our organization, the Samidoun Palestinian Prisoner Solidarity Network, was designated by Canada as a terrorist entity in October 2024 for literally no other reason than public demonstrations, freedom of expression, and freedom of action. Multiple people's homes in Toronto and Vancouver and elsewhere have been raided by armed police, many times at hours like 5 and 6 a.m. Their doors broken down because they participated in protest actions to bring an end to genocide. Canadian students have been expelled and suspended from their universities. People have lost their jobs across the country. So there is a very real threat to freedom of expression in Canada, and that is being pursued by Zionists and by the Canadian government acting as complicit, as aiding and abetting genocide against people who are organizing to bring genocide to an end. Guy Hochman was an active member of a genocidal foreign military force. There is absolutely no question of freedom of expression here. This is a question of actions that were committed at the behest of a genocidal government, at the behest as an enlisted member, as someone who was not just drafted into the army, even though that is also not in any way under the law an exemption from committing war crimes and crimes against humanity, but someone who actively worked to become and to return to the occupation army in order to pursue those genocidal goals. This is a question of action, of agency. There's no question of freedom of expression here, but on the contrary, there is a very real freedom of expression crisis in Canada. There are places throughout Canada where they are attempting to pass a so-called bubble law, where you are not allowed to protest within a number of meters of, for example, various kinds of institutions, including places of worship. Now, this may seem reasonable, when thinking about it outside the context, but why are these laws being promoted? They are being promoted because various Zionist institutions have been promoting the land sale of stolen Palestinian land, and unfortunately enlisting religious institutions as the location to hold these land sales. So they want to be able to stop people from protesting the theft of stolen Palestinian land. Once again, there is a freedom of expression crisis in Canada, but those who are being most targeted by it are those working to end genocide.
No, most definitely. And I think that's very, very important to note. Finally, before I let you go, Charlotte, what happens next in this case, both legally and strategically? We know that he's been released. Are there further steps that are going to be taken, or this is it? It's done, it's closed?
No, there's no reason to believe that it is closed. In general, an active criminal investigation, which is what this dossier provided, was information and evidence to pursue an active criminal investigation. I mean, much like, say, for example, making a police report, typically that requires investigation and follow-up. And so the Canadian lawyers who have been working together with the Hind Rajab Foundation will certainly be working to pursue to make sure that justice is done in Canada as well as in all other countries. And also, of course, course, this is not limited to one Zionist war criminal. There is an institution here. This is the Zionist occupation forces, as well as, frankly, state officials in Canada and elsewhere who are fully complicit in, these ongoing attacks. So this includes, working to actually implement a real arms embargo from Canada to the Zionist regime. I mean, as we all know, the Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney made a quite widely recognized speech at the infamous World Economic Forum in Davos just a couple of days ago, in which he clearly and openly declared that the Canadian state, as well as other Western governments, have long been part of a system in which international law only applied to selectively, essentially, to those who it was used against those who were not part of the U.S. Sphere of influence, and that Canada was involved in this. And this is a confession. So if that confession is to be taken seriously, then it's time for Canada to end its ongoing complicity in the U.S. Zionist genocide in Gaza, implement a real arms embargo, and hold those accountable who are perpetrators of genocide.
There you go. Charlotte Kate's coming to us live from Vancouver. Thank you so much for giving us your time. Always a pleasure. And looking to further more engagements in the new year.
Thank you so much.
There you go. And with that, we've come to the end of the top story of the day. Very, very big one. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, News and Views continues.